Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Beyond the Champion podcast, finally. Apologies for the delay, but it's here now. I'm Ollie Matthews. We're not going to get into my history too much, basically. Fat boy, turned fit, competed in bodybuilding, got plenty of knowledge and experience along the way. Now working with professional athletes from the endurance world, physique world, people just wanting to become better versions of themselves and all of that. What I will let you know is that we're going to bring you some amazing guests from the world of health, sport, fitness, nutrition, really get in depth, answering some of your questions along the way. So follow us on Twitter, and that is at OJPT, OJAYPT, at BTC0, and get in touch on Facebook. First off, we've got ALEX VIADA here with us, and it's a bit of a funny story here because I actually approached Alex for coaching, which he doesn't necessarily realise. I haven't actually told him that face-to-face yet. I approached him for coaching, and he actually thought I was asking to be a coach. Really liked what I was doing on social media, what sort of clients I was working with, the niche that we've got going down, and actually approached me to become a coach on Complete Human Performance. So if you don't know who ALEX VIADA is, competes in powerlifting, really great physique going on, but also does ironman at the same time, ultra marathons, and real amazing endurance work. And built up a team of coaches on www.completehumanperformance.com. Specializes in basically it's the hybrid training, and yeah, you can be fit, you can be strong, you can look good, you can feel good, and you can have amazing endurance as well. So thank you for tuning in. I'm going to get a show up every 2 weeks, and we'll go from here. Enjoy. Okay, Alex, so thank you for joining us for the first Beyond the Champion show. We've got a few questions that have come up and that we've gone backwards and forwards because with the company that we've got built up with Complete Human Performance that you've built up over the last few years, it seems to be going against the norm. And with regards to getting athletes ready with strength and going for endurance and going for all different types of events. Previously, things that have not been able to be done, that people have said that aren't possible. So, first off, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
If
Pleasure.
you want to just tell us a little bit about your history, just like briefly, and then we'll go into the company as we say. So,
sure. Yeah, I've actually been in the field both directly and indirectly for, coming up on 14 years now. That just made me feel very old. I've been training others, been coaching others for about the last 8 years. I come primarily from a strength background. Played multiple sports in high school. Played beer pong in college, but then got back into sports when I graduated. Always had an interest in the field, very interested in biomechanics, human nutrition. That's actually where I started doing a lot of my graduate work. And like I said, I very much a preferential strength athlete over time, but became interested in endurance sports in about 2007. Very good friends. Very good friends with a lot of marathon runners, ultra runners, people of that ilk, and really became kind of interested in the integration. I'm very much an advocate of pushing yourself, but also having fun and pushing your limits of what you can do, and also staying healthy. And I think for a strength athlete who was struggling with some physical fitness issues, I think endurance sports was a fun and entertaining outlet, and really spent the last couple years really working on a coherent combined approach for training strength and endurance concurrently, and for adapting this to multiple athletes from different fields and different backgrounds.
Okay, cool. So with the actual business and like with what has actually come through, what's your biggest achievement personally? And then if we look at some of the athletes that have actually jumped out and actually shone with the actual training from the coaches.
For me personally, I think the thing I was most proud of is, for me, the long distance stuff has always been difficult. When I first got into marathons years back, tried all of my horrible overtraining programs and everything else. I had a lot of problems. I got shin splints, I got stress fractures. all these other issues, and I'm sure any larger individual who's ever tried running for the first time has probably encountered these all within a month. So, back in the day when they'd say, don't do cardio kills your gains, and I had all those problems, and I couldn't have agreed more at the time. But over the years, about a year and a half ago, I was pretty much at my strength peak. I think I pulled 700 pounds, and then about 5 weeks later, I did the Umstead 50 miler ultra, which was probably, I think just in terms of finally saying, okay, hey, this all actually works. I've been following this kind of program for about a year, and it all kind of came together. For me, that was the biggest thing. Personally, I think as far as the company goes, there are so many stories at this point that kind of blow that away. We've got the amount of people we've had, especially strength athletes, powerlifters, who are on one side of the spectrum. We've got 300 plus pound guys. We helped a 325 pound former pro strongman actually pass his fire department pretest. He was unable to pass this. His blood pressure was too high. His cardiovascular fitness was too low. He couldn't pass it. And, we worked with him for about 6 weeks. And not only did he pass it, but he was the kind of thing, he said, I feel like I can play with my kids again. I feel like I still feel strong. I still feel good, but I've got this level of fitness now I've never had before. And so, we've got everything from that to, we've got, we had a 260 pound, again, pro strongman run a 10K in about 50 minutes a few weeks ago. So, we've got a lot of these kind of stories, particularly with a lot of strength athletes who used to be very biased against cardiovascular training and endurance training, who suddenly are not only exposed to it, but are actually enjoying it and finding that they can make good progress in it. And just the positive impact it's had on their quality of life is tremendous.
Definitely. And it's not even a case of they're doing it at separate times as well. Like, there was Kelly, your other half, was it the powerlifting and then the marathon she done in the same weekend?
Yeah, within, at 123 pounds, and she's an amputee, she wears a prosthetic. At 123 pounds, she deadlifted 320, and then about 12 hours later, I think she was lined up on the start line for the marathon, and actually PR'd her marathon. Yeah. So, and that's the kind of thing that's so much fun about this whole approach is, I know powerlifting, endurance running, they're all very different sort of mentalities, different mindset. You feel different when you do them. They need a different kind of focus and mental. It's so much fun to be able to introduce athletes to different kinds of athleticism and, develop a healthy respect for it along the way and really round them out as individuals and as athletes.
So, like, an athlete comes to you and they're used to doing their powerlifting, and they've got that mind frame of they do their meet and they've got a few lifts in a day, so it's really like their mind's focused on those lifts. How do you then get their mind to train and then go through 4 or 5 hours of a marathon at the same time? How do you manage to wean them from one thing to the other and have a happy medium?
Well, that's actually a big part of the approach, because a lot of what I talk about is it's not just the physical strain on the body of doing all these different kinds of activity. It's also the mental strain. I know that in any kind of competition, any kind of training, there's always a different kind of, mental engagement that you need. There's a different set, getting out there to go do a maximum lift. It requires a certain amount of focus. So, there may be a little bit of fear, a little bit of intimidation, but focus, drive. You have to be able to put all your mental faculties and physical faculties to work for a split-second period. And that's exhausting. And you'll notice a lot of people when they do a meet for the next week, for the next 2 weeks, they have a very hard time getting back in the gym. Yeah. It's just, it's difficult to get under a bar again and say, okay, I'm going to do a heavy set when you've just spent an entire day putting everything towards it.
I suppose the central nervous system burns out a little bit as well doing it like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But now if you then tell them that they're going to go run for 3 hours, it's a very different mindset. It's all about, the kind of calm, the zen, the focus, everything that lifting is not in a lot of ways. Yeah. And it's actually, for a lot of people, I talk about the overlap of stressors and how improving your conditioning can help your lifting because it increases your work capacity. I find that for a lot of people, being able to mentally zone out like you do in a lot of endurance sports can actually kind of reset you on the other side. You know, a little bit like a counterpoint to the high intensity of the lifting. And actually, it's the exact mental break they need to get back to their lifting afterwards. So in some ways, they very much complement each other because they're such different kinds of engagement.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And like personally, when I've been on longer runs, and it's just like you're zoned out, and it's like you're in your own world, and there's nothing that it's a complete different feeling, but it's still a great feeling. It's like it's out of body experience as such. Like you're lifting your heaviest weight that you can lift, and then you're running, and it is complete other ends of the spectrum. So you touched on it there with regards to like one of the benefits that would be a selling point to powerlifters, that guy spent a lot more time with his family and he feels healthier with it now.
Yeah.
How would you convince like a strength guy, or not necessarily convince, if they want to do it, they'll do it. But like, what benefits? I mean, what would the strength training benefits be for like an endurance athlete, and for the other way around? Like, why would they do the hybrid training, so to speak?
Well, so I guess we'll start with the strength athletes. Yeah. And so for them, there's the whole issue of, people talk about general versus specific work capacity. General work capacity is, how much volume you can tolerate in a given time period, how well you recover between sets and everything else. Specific work capacity is how much volume you can actually tolerate discretely, how many repetitions at a given weight you can do on squats and the like. A lot of the conditioning improves that general work capacity. I found with a lot of strength athletes, they're able to carry on longer overall training sessions or condense more work into a shorter period of time. Simply because the recovery is better. Their heart rate comes down a little bit faster between sets. They can catch their breath more easily. They can push themselves to their next set. They'll need 4 minutes to get ready for, or they'll need 3 minutes to get ready for the next set rather than 5 minutes to get ready for the next set. They can do one more set in their training. And the one thing that's been found again and again is, all else being equal, recovery being equal, everything else being equal, nearly two identical athletes, the one who's actually, if you say one has actually been able to do 10% more work in his training on meet day, on competition day, he's going to be the better athlete. He's done more repetitions. He's done more productive training, and that's a major point as well. We actually have one individual we train. He's going for a 400 kilo deadlift is his goal this time around, and we've actually got him. I've got him running intervals, I've got him doing bike training and everything else, and he says one of the intangibles he never expected. He says he's actually missed a squat in a meet before because he was so out of breath from tying his knee wraps or from wrapping his knees.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And he says, suddenly for the first time, he doesn't have any of those issues. That sort of thing isn't tiring to him, and he says it's such a different way to approach his training because he's not exhausted when he gets up to the bar. He feels good. He feels like, okay, I'm 100%, I'm fresh mentally, physically, everything else. So that's a major, major benefit. I mean, outside of the health benefits and everything else.
Yeah, and he can obviously get up the stairs, obviously, without getting out of breath as well. So
exactly.
It's one of the big things that people always joke about, but it's a massive health plus, like, of being fit. Like, there's the off-season, but then there's taking it to the extremes. When you can't get up 10 stairs without getting out of breath, or even tie your shoes, as you say, then it's not healthy, no matter what anyone says.
Yeah, and I've been there, and you feel a little bit like you're trapped in your own body, and that's what I said. Very early on in my experience, like I said, I played a lot of sports in high school. I ran track, I did everything else. I played football. I said, I'm in good shape. I started strength training regularly. I looked like I was in shape. I felt good, and then I got talked into going out and training for a 5K. And, the first mile felt fine. The first training run we did, halfway through the second mile, I started getting tunnel vision. My eyes, I started seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel and everything else. And I said, you know what? I'm really out of shape. And it was an eye-opener.
I can imagine. I mean, even for myself, where previously, years ago, I'd run a couple of 5Ks and 10Ks, but then stopped it where I went straight into bodybuilding and things. And it was a case of, before Christmas, I couldn't run nearly 2 miles. My back was pumping up, my glutes were pumping up, and it was just horrible. I was out of breath, and it just felt like that was 10 miles. And then now, being able to run a little bit further, it's a bit annoying, having a bit of an injury with my Achilles now, but up in the miles so quickly. So, it's definitely something where you notice that health come, and it seems to come pretty quickly as well. So,
that's
on the other hand, like, what about with the endurance athletes? What would be some of the benefits for them to get involved with strength training, and like, how would we then get involved with it? So,
well, it's interesting because if you look at, people will bring up the example of marathon runners doing strength training, and they'll say, well, how many of the Kenyans do strength training?
Yeah.
None. How many of us are Kenyans? And there's a certain notion underlying all this, that obviously there's the absolute pure performance side of things, but there's also the athlete as an individual. So needless to say, there are benefits, day-to-day benefits, obviously, of doing strength training, because there's just being able to functionally go about your daily life. But one of the most important things, I think, as far as strength training goes for endurance athletes is, once again, we're talking about quality of the athlete. People talk about injury prevention. That doesn't just mean injury prevention while you're running.
Yeah.
That can just mean overall general robustness. Strength training, builds that bone density all over the body. It, you talk about a lot of runners who get even issues with stress fractures and the like and everything else. Regular strength training will actually strengthen those bones, minimal energy cost or minimal weight cost. So in that respect, it'll make you more durable. And a little bit like where you say in strength training, the individual who does more sets is going to be the stronger athlete at the end of the day. With running, if you can do strength training and you can reduce your likelihood of certain chronic overuse injuries, if you can improve your mobility a little bit through regular strength training, if you can improve just the strength of your ligaments, for example, heavy squatting, heavy lunging, things like that actually do tax the ligaments and can strengthen them over time. All of those things are going to reduce your likelihood of chronic injury, but not only that, they're going to improve the rate at which you recover from them. And the amount of runners and triathletes and other individuals we work with who have had periods in their life where they've been injured and been unable to train for 4 to 5 months, you say, well, if over the course of your training you could have cut that time in half, cut that recovery time in half, because you were a more balanced athlete, because you had stronger bones, because you had stronger tendons, everything else, you say, well, you would be a lot further on in your training right now.
Yeah.
And so I guess when I say injury prevention, yes, there's always the little things like you strengthen your ligaments in your ankle, you're less likely to roll it on a rock on a trail run, but it can still happen. But again, we're talking about overall athlete robustness, and I think that's something that is way too easy to overlook, because people always want to say, is this going to take 2 seconds off my mile time? Or is this going to take that 30 seconds off my 5K? Is this going to add 6 watts? All that kind of stuff. And you say, well, perhaps yes. But even if it doesn't, it's going to give you more years of healthy training over the course of your career.
Yeah, I can imagine that sort of thing. And with an endurance athlete as well, like, you get a triathlete that comes to you, even, like, say they're looking for a real big endurance, say an ironman, and they're already training 15, 20 hours a week. Mm-hmm. What ways do you then get the strength training into their programming? How would you program that?
Well, one of the biggest things, of course, is looking at that 15 hours a week and seeing, well, what are the critical workouts you're doing here? For an Ironman, obviously, you need a certain amount of hours on the road. You need a certain amount of hours on the bike. You need a certain amount of hours in the pool. There's no way around that. The tendency, the first thing, though, you do is, of course, look at the programming and say, well, is there anything absolutely superfluous in here?
Yeah.
You're doing your you're doing your over distance work, you're doing your low intensity work, you're doing your tempo work, you're doing some of your interval work. Are there workouts in here that are just, you're adding on a mile for the sake of adding on a mile? And you start to look for the low-hanging fruit in that regard and see, well, what can I eliminate? Because the other issue is strength training, there's sort of this overlap of stressors, if you talk about it that way. You say, I'm going for a long run, or I'm going for a long ride. And part of the purpose of a long ride, say the 6 to 7 hour over distance ride that some Ironman triathletes do, part of it is getting used to riding on tired legs. The things that happen at the end of 100 miles, you're talking about substrate depletion in the legs, low glycogen levels, you're talking about soreness, you're talking about everything else. And a lot of triathletes need to be able to know how to perform under those circumstances. They need to know how to fuel to avoid bonking at the end of that. They need to know how to adjust their cadence, how to keep a high cadence at that point to prevent fatigue. All of those kind of things are part of the purpose of those long workouts. If you can pre-fatigue the individual with a targeted strength training session before that, you can reduce that ride time by 15%, by 20%, to free up that 45 minutes you would need to do some heavy squats, to do some walking lunges, to do something along those lines, to do that strength training. You'll get the benefit of the strength training, but you'll also still be able to maintain all the benefits of that ride. And I think by using the strength training to sort of pre-fatigue and to compound the effect, the intended effect of the workout, you can add in training without really having to increase the number of hours all that much.
So it'd be a little bit like, I suppose, if you were looking at it from like hypertrophy or say a bodybuilding sort of thing, like the pre-exhaust where you would do your leg extensions before a squat in a minimal sort of way,
exactly.
But in a bigger picture. So like if they're doing an ultra marathon, you could actually cut the training time in the ultras down, and you're not going to have to take any more time to actually get anything else in there training wise.
Absolutely.
So in the Hyper Training book, so we've just released the book. Was it last week?
So I think it was actually, what was it about 10 days?
Yeah. So how has it actually gone down with regards to, are people receiving it well and they're liking it?
Yeah, I don't think I've actually heard any real disagreements on the concept. I think what's been the most gratifying is speaking to different coaches from different backgrounds who've actually come to somewhat similar conclusions in their own field.
Yep.
Talking about things like the consolidation of stressors that I mentioned in there, the removal of junk miles, the targeted workouts, the way that we'll structure the whole pyramid of periodization, moving from non-specific to more specific activities. A lot of those things, it's been very interesting because I've spoken to triathlon coaches, I've spoken to track coaches, I've spoken to CrossFit coaches, strongman coaches. I was just having a conversation with a lacrosse coach. And all these individuals who do fairly complex sports, they all, about 30% of the book was framing things that they'd already found.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is the sign that I said, okay, this is actually something that can speak to most coaches and most athletes out there, because the concepts within it are not about let's do a powerlifting meet and let's run an ultra marathon. The concept in it is, let's be able to build athleticism across a wide spectrum of athletes, build those fundamental components of athleticism with minimal interference. And I think that's what almost any athlete looks for.
So, in the book as well, it says a lot of stuff with CrossFit, and there's programming, and actually updating the programming as well, which there was the webinar and things. What is the biggest thing that has been requested that wasn't in the book that has probably jumped out and you think, oh, I should have put that in there? What was the number one thing?
There are a lot of people actually who do mixed martial arts, boxing, combat sports who are very interested in it. I think that's actually been the single biggest group, because all of these are very, very technical sports. And, you look at the rise of MMA and you look at the rise of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a lot of these things. There's a tremendous technical component to all these sports. Boxing, there's no substitute for time on the bag, for time in the ring and everything else. But as these sports grow, as the level of competition increases, people are seeing the need for better conditioning, seeing the need for better strength. They said, all being equal, two individuals with the same skill get on the mat at the same time. If one has a little bit more wind and a little bit more strength, he's probably going to win. So for a lot of these folks, they're already kind of at their limit of what they can afford hourly when it comes to their sport training. But then they want to know, what can I do? What's the most productive way to make me just a little bit stronger? What's the most productive way to make me, to get me through to the final round and not get completely gassed out? So that's been a huge part of the percentage of the questions that have come in. The other thing is interest from the military as well. We work with, I would say about 30 to 35% of this company's clientele are military. A lot of individuals who are looking for, various selections as well, various, special forces, SEALs, anything else, because those are very, very challenging programs to get through. They're challenging to qualify for, they're challenging to get through, and you really do need this combination of endurance, durability. Absolutely, there are certain minimum levels of strength you need to achieve them. So a lot of these folks are very interested in this whole approach.
And what's the biggest demand that it's been from the military people? Like, is it going to be an increase in strength, like, or I suppose they're going to have to be complete machines. So they're going to have to be so fast and have the endurance. So they're going to be the ultimate program for you, really.
It is, and it's very interesting because I know at some point we talked a bit about some of the candidates that we have, and some of their numbers are mind-blowingly off the charts. We mentioned a couple of those. They do like to keep it on the down low, of course, because they're all competing against each other. But these individuals they cannot afford to have any weaknesses. And I think one of the biggest things that a lot of them struggle with is a lot of these selection programs are not particularly public about what they go through. They're not going to tell everybody exactly what they're doing on every single day. People have a fairly good idea, but they have to be prepared for everything. And I think part of what they come to us for is they say, look, I can't afford to have any weaknesses. I can't afford to be too heavy. I can't afford to not have a fast 1.5 mile because that's one of the tests, but I can't afford to be slow, because they'll have 12 to 18 mile ruck marches as well, where they put, about 20, 30 kilos on their back and they'll just have to go for 12 hours. So they need all ends of the spectrum there. They're going to be carrying heavy objects for an extended period of time. So this is the kind of training that doesn't really exist out there. And you see it in a few, kind of programs at large. And that's part of why CrossFit has gotten so popular among a lot of these guys. But, a lot of them, they just say, well, I need to do everything. Yeah. I need to improve my endurance. I need to improve my strength. I need to improve my durability, my grip, my body composition, everything across the board. And this whole training concept that we developed is precisely what lends itself to that kind of programming.
I suppose with that sort of programming as well, like with a powerlifter and even with like an endurance athlete, you've got an off season where you can play with to get their body composition down. But with a person in the military, they've got to be ready year round. So how would you actually program if they've got to drop weight and perform? Or would there be a way of actually programming that? Or let's touch a little bit on the nutritional side of things.
Yeah, so that's obviously a pretty big challenge, and that's why we have folks specifically to help out with the nutrition component. I think the hardest thing is obviously, performance on reduced calories is always extremely challenging. Yeah. Ordinary circumstances, I'm not, for a hypercaloric or isocaloric individual, someone who's eating enough to either gain or maintain, I think meal timing is a little bit overrated. Yeah. But for an individual who's trying to lose weight, it is absolutely crucial. Proper nutrition, proper supplementation, whether it be electrolytes or anything along those lines, all of that is so there's no substitute for it. And I think what we actually do in a lot of our programming is the microcycle, whether it be the week, the 8 days to 9 days of the training program, is periodized in its own way. From high intensity work but low volume on one end of the spectrum to the low intensity high volume work on the other end of the spectrum. So if an individual is looking to improve everything at once, we periodize their caloric intake as well. We keep all our individuals fairly high carbohydrate because performance is absolutely key. But we'll reduce their calories when they're doing just the high intensity work because the energy needs are lower, but then ramp them up and even go hypercaloric, even have them eating over maintenance sometimes on those long duration days because they can't afford to not complete a workout because of low calories. So that overall approach is kind of what lets this happen. But like I said, the nutrition component is always one of the most challenging simply because it affects everything.
Yeah. So with the nutritional side of things, we're going over the actual maintenance calories and going quite high on the longer duration, on the Saturdays and Sundays at the end of the weeks and things. So say someone's going out on a 7-hour ruck march, or they're going out on their long ride, and it's a case of how do they fuel and keep hydrated during that session? And I'm just trying to phrase the question right because I want to make sure we get the answer that the guys want, whilst a puppy is trying to bite my finger off as well. But yeah, so we've got the end of the week where you're going to have those longer rides, and it will take time away from having your whole food and sitting down and having your meal at home. So without causing a lot of gastrointestinal stress, keeping your body hydrated and keeping those calories in, how would you then get that if someone is on a bike or on a march or going on a really long, say, training for an ultra marathon on a weekend or something?
Well, actually, so, I'm not going to, shill a product here or anything, but we did actually develop a product that actually came from, we actually just used to recommend a basic formula for individuals, specifically targeted towards individuals doing long ruck marches in the military. And it was essentially, if you're familiar with, Pedialyte and all of those type of things, it's essentially a diluted Pedialyte with waxy maize or another similar, I think the company Generation UCAN makes a similar product. It's all that, branch chain, the cyclodextrins. So something like that is well tolerated. It's got the steady release carbohydrates people need, and it's got all the hydration they need. If people want to make something that they can just consume regularly, I would recommend either this product that we make called Mercury, or simply just take Pedialyte, dilute it 50-50 with water, add about 20 grams of about waxy maize per 24 ounces of fluid, and you can literally drink that nonstop, and it'll provide everything you need. 1 second,
I'm just going to quickly give this puppy a tube because he's scratching the cage up. I do apologise, guys, but... Dexter. That should keep him quiet for another 10 minutes or so. Apologies for that.
You bought yourself about 8 minutes of peace and quiet there.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the big things, so having the electrolytes in there in Mercury is, or any of the drinks that you have, and one of the things that is an item or an ingredient in there being glutamine. Now, previously, it's been touted to be like the muscle builder and things like that. I've used it with clients for gut health and a lot of gastrointestinal health. What's the reasoning for that being included in this drink, which you would have during a workout?
I'm sorry, for which component being included?
L-glutamine.
Oh, glutamine. So there's an interesting property of glutamine that you'll sometimes see in oral rehydration therapies. So everything about exercise hydration is about obviously managing water, but also managing electrolytes, managing the amount of salt and potassium in the cells, in the bloodstream, and in the gastrointestinal tract. If one of those areas has a dramatically higher or lower level of electrolytes, you start to have problems. One of the interesting things about, if you drink salt water, for example, water that is too salty, what's going to happen is, if you've ever played in chemistry class with osmolarity, or, look what happens to, your fingers in the bathtub or anything else, if a solution is very salty, water is going to flow into the saltier solution away. Yeah. So if you have too much salt, too many electrolytes in your stomach or a high concentration, it's going to basically restrict the absorption of water and salt into your bloodstream. Basically, in some ways, in fact, it'll just sit there for an extended period of time. Your body, when it actually pulls salt out of the system, actually actively transports it out. Water just kind of pulls itself across naturally, but salt, the cells actually have to pull it out of your small intestine. What's interesting is that there is a special transporter in all those cells that transports glutamine, because every amino acid is pulled by a different transporter into the cells, into the bloodstream. And in the process of pulling glutamine, it requires a sodium molecule at the same time. Okay. So in the process of absorbing the glutamine, totally different receptors, it's absorbing additional salt. So including the glutamine increases the rate of salt absorption out of your stomach, which then improves the rate of water absorption. It gets more salt to your cells, into your bloodstream, into the rest of your body. So by facilitating that electrolyte absorption there, it actually compounds the effect of the replenishment. So you'll sometimes see it in slightly more comprehensive oral rehydration packets.
Yeah. So it helps you. It's going to help you hydrate over the course of a session, essentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell people, if you want to add a little bit yourself, just put about 2 grams, very small amount per liter of whatever hydration fluid you use, and it'll make a difference.
Okay, cool. So a couple of questions which haven't necessarily been answered, which when we've sent out a post out on Facebook, what area of training goals would get the most focus? So does it depend on the meet, or what is next in the calendar? I think we've answered the question a little bit. If can it be done with Kelly's achievement a few weeks ago, but is it going to be a case of they have to be at different times, or can they be at the same time?
You know, it does work better with different times, just because the tapering for any event is kind of a black art, and everybody has their own way of doing it and everything else. And your taper for a powerlifting meet may look very different than your taper for an endurance meet. I think the reason why I like to space them out is so that you can get back into the competition mindset a little more easily. It's very, very taxing on the body to peak for both at the same time. You can do it, but part of a peaking and taper is pushing yourself to the point of overreaching and then backing off and allowing some level of supercompensation. And doing that on both the strength side and the endurance side, you're going to feel like absolute garbage for about a week there. And if you're someone who's doing this for the love of it, that's very, very difficult to do. I know when Kelly did that dual peaking as well, she about 5 or 6 days out, she felt like she had been run over by a steamroller. And, after the competition, everything was exhausted. So I usually recommend people split it up, not because it's physically impossible to do, because, again, this programming is designed to advance every component at once, but more thinking about the athlete, the individual, somebody who wants to compete multiple times in a year. It takes a long time to get back on track afterwards, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons to avoid that.
Yeah. Okay. And another question coming from, I've actually got the name, so it's Anna Maria. She's a marathon runner and also does like long bike rides, Gran Fondo. And also thinking of doing Ride the Rocks. She's been working on CrossFit to get stronger. This is probably a question which has come up quite a lot. How long, roughly, it is going to be one of those answers which comes across all the time in the fitness industry to a degree of it depends, obviously, on the individual, but how long does it usually take for the adaptation or transition so they feel comfortable doing both?
Yeah, I notice a lot of people when they start this sort of programming or any sort of concurrent or hybrid programming, whether it be, CrossFit and cycling or anything else, there is an extended period of time where individuals feel like their performance across the board has just declined.
Yeah.
Suddenly, every time they go out for a bike ride, their legs are sore, especially if you did CrossFit, because, you did, I don't know, a Metcon consisting of a total of 150 wall balls 2 days before, so your legs are still absolutely toast. The number one thing I tell people is, first of all, your training performance is going to be proportionately lower than you'd be accustomed to. Most people, when they train, they obviously never train at their peak. If somebody can go out tomorrow and match their all-time marathon PR, then what's the point of tapering? What's the point of training any further? Just go do it. You're peaking for race day. So they may be, say, on a typical training day, their performance will be, and I'm just pulling out an arbitrary number, 10% inferior to their race day performance. When you're doing this kind of programming, since you're always operating slightly more physically taxed, a little bit more sore, you may say my performance is actually 15% lower than it will be on race day, or 20% lower than it will be on race day. We found a lot of people who do this sort of programming perform significantly better after their taper than you would have thought by looking at the quality of the programming. So Anna Maria, she may be feeling like she's running more slowly than she could be, and her cycling, her, whatever she's using to measure her wattage, her heart rate, whatever else, may be not as good as she's accustomed to, but that doesn't mean her fitness level is less. It just means that the body is a little bit more taxed, so it's not able to perform quite up to par. Of course, if this extends for a period of time, we typically notice people start to find their new normal after about 6 to 8 weeks, where they say, okay, I'm finally in the groove now. I've worked out how this all comes together, because the first month for everybody is always a wash.
Yeah.
They feel pretty terrible. They're seeing some things go up, some things go down. The thing I'd make sure of, though, is that she's not trying to do the exact same cycling and marathon program that she was before the CrossFit, because one of the things I say is that a good cycling program or a good marathon program, it's going to use 95% of your faculties, 95% of your recovery, of your energy, of everything else. If it's only using 80%, it's probably not a good program because you're not maximizing the work you can do. Conversely, a good CrossFit program is going to already tax your recovery on its own. So if you try combining the two, you're doing more work than any two individuals. You're doing as much work as two individuals. So the CrossFit and the marathon training should all be periodized a little bit. Reduce the amounts of either that you're doing. Make your CrossFit coach aware of the additional work you're doing, and if he or she is not really familiar with the particular strain on the body or anything else, then that's a case where you may say, well, look, I'm just going to have to take myself down from 4 classes a week to 3 classes a week, or something along those lines. So that's something the individual needs to be very aware of.
Yeah.
I also tell people, monitor your recovery, monitor your resting heart rate to check for overtraining. Heart rate variability is very useful. I find a lot of people have good luck with that. Monitor your mental status, your level of engagement, how motivated are you to work out. If those things start to flag as well, then that may not just be that 15% lower level of performance. You may actually at that point be pushing past into overreaching and into overtraining, which is never a good thing.
So, okay, and what is next personally for yourself? Like further, faster? What have you got next on the cards?
That's a good question. I think that's one of the things I realized pretty early on is that I'm by no means superhuman, and I think it was a good reminder. I was in a pretty bad bike wreck about a year and a half ago, and I tried to get back into everything too quickly and ended up just running myself into the ground. I think my biggest thing right now that I'd like to come back with is to try a few different things. To have a little bit of fun with it. I did some ultras. I love those. I still plan on doing a few more. I like adventure races. I'm actually interested in strongman competitions as well. That's kind of a fun blend of conditioning and strength and everything else. So I think it's, for me, it's about, it's going to be about trying new things. It's about trying new sports, new activities, because I think the more things you have exposure to, the better overall athlete you are, the better overall individual you are. It's I remember looking, well, not on a personal level, but I remember looking at some data on actually American football players and how many of them at the top level, at the professional level, just played football growing up versus how many played multiple different sports.
Yeah. And
something like 85% of them played multiple different sports growing up. And, I think it's that exposure to different stresses. I'm mountain biking now and having some fun with it. I'm doing a lot of different work, and I think that overall I feel healthier, I feel a little less beat up, and once again feel mentally engaged. So, for me personally, it's about having fun. I realize with people like, Dan Green out there in powerlifting, I'm certainly never going to be a record setter in my weight class. So, why kill myself to get another 50 pounds on my squat when I can just try something engaging. And, I think that's something I try to remind my athletes of all the time is you should still be having fun with this.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Performance is fun and winning races is fun and winning meets is fun, but trying new things is fun too. And with this sort of programming, you can try new things. You can do different things. You can go run your first 5K. You can do a sprint triathlon. You can do whatever you want. And you'll still be able to focus on your primary goal, but try something different.
Yeah, so that's something I'm a massive believer in, like doing things like for yourself and making sure you're happy, making sure you're having fun doing it. If something becomes a chore for too long, there's going to be times when a certain session is a chore and it's whether you pull through it, but having fun and being happy is the main thing. It's all about living your life. So
if you do any one thing for too long, you start to dread it.
Yeah.
And even if you do it for too long under the wrong circumstances, you spend 4 years doing the same track workouts and you're getting better and better and better, but you start to dread going down to the track. Maybe it's not for you anymore.
Yeah.
You can come back to it. Do something different for a year. Do something different for 2 years. Then come back and refine your excitement there. And like I said, pushing the limits is fun and it keeps you engaged. But at the end of the day, it's an important part of life, but it shouldn't overshadow everything else. It should enhance the rest of your life. So that's a little bit where I'm at. I'm 35 years old at this point. I'm not getting any younger. I'm already starting to break into the age groups where the performance is expected to go down a little bit. So, it's at this point, I think I've probably hit some of my all-time bests. So I'm just gonna, see what I can do and see how I can stay healthy, and that's where I'm at.
Exciting times there. So, is there anyone who you would recommend who would be good to come on the podcast next? In maybe one of the coaches or anyone in your network?
Yeah, gosh, absolutely. As far as the coaches go, we've got such a wide variety. One of the individuals I would probably recommend is we've got Steve Tripp, who's actually in terms of biomechanics, he's probably one of my favorite individuals out there because he's very understated. Doesn't advertise what he does a lot, but he takes a very much an analytical approach to looking at human movement, to looking at human performance, to analyzing weaknesses. And that's one of the things we all struggle with in our programming. When we look at ourselves as saying, well, why am I struggling with this movement? Why am I struggling here? Why do I have this chronic issue? And it's very interesting to see, somebody go through the thought process of how you break down what you could be doing wrong and how to look at the human body. And, that's one of my kind of things I like to nerd out on. So yeah, I think he'd be a great one to speak to.
I'll give him a shout and get him on to get his word across. So, is there anything else you would like to add at all? And how can the guys get in touch with you? How can they get hold of the book Hybrid Training?
Yeah. So in terms of anything else I want to get across, I think I just more than anything else, I just wanted to say how exciting it's been over the last couple of years as I think that this approach has taken hold. It's really funny because I used to, on social media, I used to have two very discrete groups of people that you would see. You would see all the runners posting their latest, map my route, or map my ride, or their Strava data, or their Garmin data. There'll be all the runners. And you'd have all the lifters posting their lifting videos. And now you can't tell who's doing what. We've got one of our super heavyweights. He just totaled elite in super heavyweight, won his meet, qualified for nationals, and here he is talking about the last run he went on and setting his new mile PR. And so I think it's just been really, really cool to see how people have picked up on this concept, and I think it's been so gratifying to see what an open mind people have kept to it, because you go back several years and there used to be a very harsh divide between the two. And cardio kills your gains, or strength training makes you too big and bulky to be a runner. And I think that's all starting to break down now. And it's leading to some very cool human achievements. I mean, things you wouldn't think possible. The 325-pound pro strongman we had who ran an 8:15 mile. And you just go, for a runner, that's no big deal. But think about how much energy that individual has produced to do that speed. So, what people used to think were a little bit outside the realms of possibility are now, it's reframing what's possible, not because we're producing superhumans, but because we're actually just showing what regular humans are capable of. And I think that's been the cool thing. And that's something everyone can take away, is you might be surprised at how far you can go on any end of the spectrum. Don't shut any doors. So that's it more than anything. So the book, The Hybrid Athlete, is available on JTS Strength, Juggernaut Training Systems. It's currently an ebook. I might be doing an audiobook version of it. But it's got a pretty good overview of the basic methodology, some of the nutrition components, some of the basic biology. And we're going to be releasing several specialized routines over the next couple months to really give people a more in-depth, granular look at what we do. So, and if anyone wants to contact me or anyone on the team, any of our coaches, they can just go to CompleteHumanPerformance.com. There's a contact us form, and we're all available. We're all happy to chat. So that's us.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time today. I'll pop all the links in the show notes as well anyway. So,
Great.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.